In the ancient kingdom of Adodo, the gods ruled every aspect of their lives. Their decrees were final, and none dared question them. For centuries, a sacred law governed the royal family. The prince must marry from a family chosen by the gods. Disobedience meant losing the crown, and with it the kingdom's stability. Prince Afamefuna, the only heir to King Anozie, bore the weight of this tradition. Though groomed for leadership since birth, his heart now defiled his destiny. He had fallen deeply in love with Mmasi, a maiden whose beauty and gentle spirit captivated him. Yet, the looming reality of the gods' decree darkened their love. Mmasi was a mystery. She avoided questions about her family and her past, her smile fading whenever Afamefuna pressed for details. "My prince," she would say softly, "all that matters is the love we share." But love alone couldn't defy the gods. Mmasi's life was a tale of suffering. After her mother's death, her father married another woman, Adego, who gave birth to a daughter, Ugomma. Adego's jealousy of Mmasi's beauty and her late mother's legacy turned into venom. She maltreated Mmasi at every opportunity, forcing her to cook, clean, and endure harsh punishments. Ugomma, her stepsister, following her mother's example, got extremely delighted in mocking Mmasi's humble demeanor. "Look at her, the orphan princess," Ugomma would sneer. Their father always tried to protect his beloved daughter, but his constant travels as a merchant left Mmasi at the mercy of Adego and her stepsister. However, Mmasi found solace in her secret meetings with the prince. Their favorite spot under the ancient Udala tree was a haven where they dreamt of a future together, far from the cruelty of the world. One evening, under the light of a crescent moon, Prince Afamefuna held Mmasi close beneath the Udala tree. He had made his decision. "I have to let you go," he said, his voice trembling. Mmasi's eyes widened. "What do you mean, my prince?" "The gods will soon choose a family for me to marry into. If I marry you without their blessing, I will lose the throne. The kingship will fall into the hands of my father's enemy, Ichie Okafor. I cannot let that happen," he said. Tears streamed down Mmasi's face. "My prince, you are my everything. How can I live without you?" He held her tightly, his own tears falling. "I love you more than anything, Mmasi. But here my hands are tied. My people comes first. Please forgive me." For days, Mmasi wept, her heart shattered. Afamefuna was equally broken, but he buried his pain, preparing himself to obey the gods. A week later, the gods revealed their choice. The elders summoned the prince and led him to the house of Ichie Madoka. As they approached, they saw him sitting in front of his hut. He looked at them surprised. The elders and the prince greeted him, and he offered them a seat. The elders explained their mission to Ichie Madoka, who welcomed them warmly. "The gods have finally smiled upon my family," he said. "Well, I have two very beautiful and adorable daughters. Hence, you may have to choose one," he added proudly. One of the elders requested that they see the girls in question, but Ichie Madoka told them that he had sent them on an errand and that they would be back shortly. He pleaded that they wait a little more longer. The prince, eager to see them, to know if any could compare to his love Mmasi, no matter how little, accepted to wait. Up until that very moment, all he kept thinking about was her. If only there was a way or anything he could do to have her on the throne, he would shamelessly do it, but there was none. While the elders were waiting and discussing, Maduka's daughters arrived. Afamefuna froze when he saw Mmasi in the compound, carrying a basket of yam. "Mmasi," he whispered in disbelief. She stared at him, equally shocked. You are here. What are you doing here?" she asked, scanning through everyone with her eyes. The elders and Ichie Maduka looked surprised. Ichie Maduka cleared his throat to utter the silence. "Well, my prince, it seems you have already met with one of my daughters, Mmasi." He pointed his fingers towards her. "Mmasi here is my first daughter, while Ugomma is my second daughter." Prince's eyes glowed with joy. The gods must have truly loved him, he thought. His love finally won. He wanted to hug Mmasi that instant, but he had to comport himself. Without hesitating, he declared that he chose Mmasi to be his bride. The elders could sense some love story, but none said a word. They were rather happy that the prince got to choose a bride from the selected family. When the elders left, Mmasi, who was surprised and curious, quickly asked the father what was going on, and he explained everything to her. Her heart leapt for joy. Ugomma, her sister, became extremely jealous. When Adego returned from the market, Ugomma told her mom everything that happened, and her face twisted with jealousy and rage. From that moment, she vowed to stop Mmasi from marrying the prince, no matter the cost. Adego had long hoped Ugomma would marry into royalty, elevating their status. The idea of Mmasi becoming queen enraged her. "This cannot happen," Adego whispered to Ugomma that night. "We must stop her." Ugomma smirked. "Don't worry, Mama. I have a plan," she said. Over the next few weeks, Ugomma used every trick in the book to win the prince's affection. She visited the palace with gifts, lingered during meetings, and even feigned tears, claiming she had visions of her sister's marriage ending in disaster. But Afamefuna remained steadfast. "Mmasi is the one I love," he told her. Frustrated, Adego and Ugomma devised a darker plan. If they couldn't separate Mmasi and Efumefuna through deceit, they would remove her permanently. The morning was calm, with the sun casting a soft golden glow over Adodo. Birds chirped melodiously, their songs blending with the rustling of leaves as a gentle breeze swept through the village. Mmasi stood outside her father's compound, humming softly as she prepared to head to the market. Adego approached her, smiling unusually, a sight that immediately put Mmasi on an edge. Her stepmother's smile were rare and never sincere. "Mmasi," Adego said sweetly, "we need cassava for the wedding feast. Come with us to the farm." Ugomma, standing nearby, chimed in. "Yes, sister, let's go together. It will give us time to bond." Mmasi hesitated. The sudden change in their behavior was unsettling, but she pushed her doubts aside. Perhaps, for once, they were trying to make amends. "All right," she said, grabbing a basket. The three women walked to the farm, with Mmasi leading the way, and Ugomma chatting animatedly about the wedding preparations. But beneath her cheerful words, her tone was sharp, almost mocking. The farm was eerily quiet when they arrived. The dense forest surrounding it seemed to close in. the sunlight barely piercing through the canopy of leaves. Mercy set down her basket and began gathering cassava, unaware of the dark glances Adego and Ugoma exchanged behind her. As Mercy bent to uproot a cassava tuber, a sharp crack echoed through the air. She turned just in time to see Adego swing a heavy stick towards her. The blow landed with a sickening thud on the back of her head. Pain exploded in Mercy's skull as she crumpled to the ground, gasping for breath. Dazed and struggling to comprehend what was happening, she looked up at Adego. "Mama, why?" Mercy's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes brimming with confusion and betrayal. Adego said nothing, her face twisted with cold hatred. Before Mercy could move, Ugoma stepped forward, clutching a knife. Her eyes glinted with malice, and her lips curled into a sneer. "This is your fault," Ugoma spat. "You have always been the favorite, the beautiful one, the one everyone loves. Why couldn't you just step aside? If you hadn't been in the picture, the prince would have chosen me." Mercy's heart almost broke as she stared at her stepsister, the girl she had grown up with and loved despite her cruelty. "You brought this upon yourself," Ugoma continued, her voice trembling with fury, "for refusing to let go of the prince for my sake. I have no choice but to send you to meet your mother. Farewell, dear sister, to the land beyond." With that, Ugoma raised the knife and drove it into Mercy's chest. The first stab was shocking. Mercy's breath hitched as pain ripped through her body. She tried to crawl away, but Ugoma was relentless, plunging the knife into her over and over again. Mercy's blood soaked the earth, and her once bright eyes dimmed with sorrow. She looked at her stepmother and stepsister one last time. "Why?" she whispered, her voice a faint, broken echo. Adego and Ugoma stared back, their expressions devoid of remorse. When Mercy finally fell still, Ugoma knelt beside her, wiping the blood from the knife onto her sister's torn dress. Adego, her hands shaking, looked around nervously. "We have to get rid of the body quickly," she said. The two women wrapped Mercy's lifeless form in an old cloth and dragged her through the forest. The silence of the woods seemed to mock them, each rustling leaf a whisper of judgment. They reached the edge of the river where the water was dark and deep. With one final heave, they pushed Mercy's body into the current, watching as the river swallowed her whole. The water rippled briefly, then returned to its calm flow, as though nothing had happened. Adego wiped her hands on her wrapper, her face pale. "Let's go," she said, her voice hoarse. Ugoma nodded, glancing one last time at the river. A chill ran down her spine, but she shook it off and followed her mother back to the village. As they walked home, the forest seemed to hum with an unnatural stillness. Shadows lengthened and the air grew heavy, almost suffocating. A low wind began to whistle through the trees, carrying with it an airy whisper. Adego and Ugoma quickened their pace, their hearts pounding. By the time they reached the compound, they were sweating and breathless. "Remember," Adego said, her voice firm, "we know nothing." Mercy went to the market and never returned. Ugoma nodded. The next morning, when Maduka asked of Mercy, they lied not to know where she went to or where she was. Soon, news began spreading that Mercy had gone missing. A week later, a villager found a blood-soaked cloth near the forest. Ichie Maduka confirmed it was Mmasi's cloth. It became dawn to all that she was dead. He cried bitterly. The village mourned her, but none was as deep as Afamefuna. He almost ran mad when he heard the news. It was just 2 days to their marriage ceremony. Afamefuna was inconsolable. He locked himself in his chambers for days, refusing to eat or speak. He had chased the elders with a cutlass who had come to tell him to move on with the marriage ceremony by getting married to Ugoma, as there was no time on their side, for the king's health was failing. After a month, Afamefuna was beginning to come to terms that she was truly gone. He picked up his princely duties, though still heartbroken. He constantly refused to marry Ugoma despite the elders' urging. On one of the meetings with the elders, he told them that he needed a year to mourn her properly. Meanwhile, all this time, Adego and Ugoma pretended to share his grief while plotting their next move. "You need to heal," Adego said gently on one of the days he came to visit Mmasi's grave. "Ugoma can help you move on," she completed. Over the months, Ugoma tried to win his heart. She wormed her way into Afamefuna's life. She brought him food, stayed by his side during dark moments, and would often remind him of Mmasi's wishes. "She would want you to be happy," Ugoma whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. She often cried in his presence, claiming she saw visions of Mmasi urging her to comfort him. Slowly, her persistence began to wear him down. By next year, just before the Aruku festival, their wedding was announced. Afamefuna accepted to marry her, for his father's health was reducing drastically, and Ugoma had proven to be a great companion. The day of Ugoma's marriage to Prince Afamefuna dawned with bright skies, but a storm of secrets loomed over the ceremony. The palace grounds were filled with villagers, drummers, and dancers, all gathered to witness the union that would secure the royal lineage. Afamefuna sat solemnly on his throne, his heart heavy. Though months had passed since Mmasi's disappearance, he still felt her absence keenly. Ugomma, adorned in an elaborate gown, stood beside him with a triumphant smile. The chief priest raised his staff to commence the marriage rites, but just as the first words left his lip, a loud voice interrupted. "Stop this ceremony!" All heads turned as a priestess, draped in white and clutching a staff adorned with cowries, strode into the courtyard. Her face was stern, her voice commanding. "This union is a lie," the priestess declared. "The gods have revealed that Ugoma is not of the chosen family." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Afamefuna stood abruptly, his eyes narrowing in confusion and disbelief. The priestess raised her staff, pointing it at Adego. "You, woman, must confess your sins before the gods strike you down." Adego's face turned ashen. She staggered backward, clutching Ugoma's arm. "Speak now or face the wrath of the gods," the priestess thundered, her voice echoing across the palace. Shaking with fear, Adego fell to her knees. "Forgive me," she cried. She began to speak, her voice trembling. "Ugomma is not Ichie Maduka's child. Before I married him, I was already pregnant. The father of my child is Ichie Okafor." Gasps filled the air as villagers turned to one another in shock. Ichie Okafor, the king's sworn rival, had always sought to overthrow the royal family. Adego continued, tears streaming down her face. Ichie Okafor and I devised a plan. If Ugoma married the prince, we would poison him on the wedding night. With no heir, the kingship would pass to Ichie Okafor's family. He promised to marry me as his second wife, and together we would rule with Ugoma as princess. The palace descended into chorus. Cries of outrage and betrayal echoed as villagers surged forward, but the guards held them back. Before the commotion could settle, a panicked villager burst into the palace courtyard, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Ghosts! Ghosts!" The crowd froze in fear. The man pointed towards the palace gates, his face pale. Moments later, three unknown men entered the courtyard, carrying a woman. They moved with purpose, their expressions firm. The chief priest raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Who are you, and why do you interrupt this sacred gathering?" One of the men stepped forward. "We bring the truth," he said. "The woman you all mourn is not dead." With that, they stepped aside and slowly revealed the lady. Gasps of disbelief and cries of astonishment filled the air. It was Mmasi. Afamefuna staggered backward, his legs nearly giving out. "Mmasi," he whispered, voice breaking. Mmasi stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with sorrow. "I am alive, but not because of the mercy of my family. 2 weeks before the wedding, my stepmother here and my stepsister took me to the forest under the pretense of gathering cassava. There, they attacked me, killed me, and threw my body into the ocean." The villagers gasped, their shock turning to anger. Mercy continued, "But the gods were merciful as they gave me a second chance to live. A fisherman from another village found me at the bank of the river, clinging to life. He nursed me back to health and gave me shelter until I could return." She turned to Adego and Ugoma, her eyes blazing. "You tried to kill me for your greed, but the gods have exposed your evil." Adego and Ugoma fell to the ground wailing. The priestess raised her staff, pointing it at the chief priest, who had been trying to slip away unnoticed. "You, Ezemo," the priestess said, her voice rising with righteous anger, "you are also guilty of defying the gods and partaking in this treacherous plot." The crowd gasped in unison, turning to stare at the chief priest. His face turned pale, and sweat trickled down his brow. He tried to speak, but his words faltered under the priestess' fiery glare. "What are you saying?" King Anozie demanded. After Mmasi's death, it was revealed to the chief priest that Ugoma was not of the chosen family, but he remained silent because he was bribed by Ichie Okafor when he learned about Ugoma being his biological daughter. The chief priest chose material things from an evil man over the will of the gods. "Please, forgive me, your highness," the chief priest begged, while kneeling. "Temper justice with mercy, my prince," he pleaded. King Anozie rose from his throne, his face dark with fury. "For your betrayal, Ichie Okafor, you are hereby banished from this land. Guards, take him away." Ichie Okafor struggled, but his fate was sealed. The villagers cheered as he was dragged off. Turning to Adego and Ugoma, the king's voice was cold. "As for you two, for killing your very own daughter and sister, and getting involved in this evil plot, you are hereby banished from Adodo. You will leave this land today, and if you ever return, you will face death." Adego and Ugoma wailed as they were led away, their pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. Finally, the king turned to the chief priest. Ezemo, you were entrusted with all the will of the gods, yet you choose greed and treachery. You are stripped of your title, banished from this land. Let your punishment serve as a warning to all who would defile the gods. The villagers erupted in cheers once more as Ezemo was escorted out of the palace. Prince Afamefuna walked up to Mmasi and hugged her, their love still evident. With peace restored, Afamefuna and Mmasi were finally free to marry. Her father, Ichie Maduka, was the most happiest. He hugged his daughter and cried joyfully. The wedding was the grandest celebration Adodo had ever seen. Villagers came from far and wide, bringing gifts and blessings for the couple. The palace was decorated with colorful fabrics and drummers played joyful songs. Mercy wore a bright wrapper and coral beads, her beauty lightening up the room. Afamefuna couldn't take his eyes off her as they exchanged their vows. The gods have smiled on us, Afamefuna said, holding her hand while they smiled in fulfillment. A year after their wedding, Mmasi went into labor. The kingdom was in mourning, for King Anozie had passed away earlier that day, leaving a void in the hearts of his people. As the cries of grief filled the air, a new sound emerged from the palace, a newborn's cry. Mercy had delivered a healthy baby boy. Word spread quickly, and the villagers rushed to the palace. The baby bore an unmistakable resemblance to the late king Anozie, down to the unique birthmark on his left shoulder. The gods have spoken, the priestess declared, raising her hands to the sky. The spirit of King Anozie has returned to us through this child. What had begun as a day of mourning turned into a celebration. Drummers played, villagers danced, and the palace was filled with joy. Afamefuna held his son in his arms, his heart full of pride and love. He named him Onyekachuku. Mercy smiled through her tears, knowing that their union was truly blessed by the gods. Together, they ruled the land of Adodo in peace and in unity, and they prospered in every aspect of their lives. This story is a testament of the fact that destiny cannot be denied, and that the gods can only show mercy and compassion to whoever they choose. What's your moral lesson from this story? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our amazing stories. Thanks for watching.